It's time for Twig This Week in Google. We have a very interesting conversation coming up. When Comcast got Netflix to pay a little more money for access to Comcast customers, I thought that was a violation of net neutrality. Turns out the story's a lot more complicated. We've got an expert who's going to explain all and a whole lot more coming up on Twig.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twig.
Bandwidth for This Week in Google is provided by Cachefly. CACHEFLY.com.
This is Twig, This Week in Google, episode 238, recorded February 26th, 2014, Net Brutality. This Week in Google is brought to you by Personal Capital. With Personal Capital, you'll finally have all your financial life in one place and get a clear view of everything you own. Best of all, it's free. To sign up, go to personalcapital.com/twig. And by Squarespace, the all-in-one platform that makes it fast and easy to create your own professional website or online portfolio. For a free 2-week trial and 10% off, go to squarespace.com and use the offer code TWIG2. It's time for Twig This Week in Google, the show that covers Google, but not just Google, the cloud, the Googleverse, the Twitter, the Facebook, the WhatsApp, and all of that. Joining me right now, Jeff Jarvis. He is at the City University of New York, where he's a professor of journalism.
Oh, well, my lights just went off, and I have to do the dance.
There we go. Because economizing is so important in a state school. Jeff is also the author of Public Parts and What Would Google Do and Gutenberg the Geek, and we love having him on the show each week. I have unfortunate news. Gina Trapani has the day off. She's working on Think Up. Had some stuff to do unavoidably.
How dare she have a job?
But I have very good news from GigaOM. Matthew Ingram is joining us. So it's nice that you could be here, Matthew. We appreciate it. And then I wanted to point out an article, or a blog post, actually, I read on the streaming media blog, streamingmediablog.com, about how pretty much everybody who covered the Netflix Comcast story got it wrong. The author, Dan Rayburn, is an analyst at Frost & Sullivan. He's EVP at streamingmedia.com, which is a magazine, an online site, and also a conference that throws conferences on streaming media. And this blog post, really raked everyone over the coals, TechCrunch, Wall Street Journal, NPR, for not understanding the Netflix Comcast deal. And most of us, and I'm going to include myself in this, treated it as Comcast squeezing Netflix for access to Comcast customers. And as data points, for instance, Netflix offers an Open Connect system, which many other ISPs, including Google, are members of, that give direct access to Netflix data to those ISPs and their customers at no charge. And that Comcast had been, well, I shouldn't say it this way, that Netflix had noticed a drop of streaming speeds of 27% since October on Comcast. As a Comcast customer, I had really noticed that. Netflix became almost unusable on Comcast. Some had even said, and there were some data points to demonstrate it, that Comcast was actively blocking Netflix in violation of their agreement with the FCC. So, Dan, where did we get it wrong?
Well,
in every respect.
it's a confusing topic. But the thing that people don't understand is, and it's understandable they don't get it because they're not from the industry or the networking spaces. People are using a lot of terms like transit, peering, interconnection, CDN, and they don't really understand how it all connects with one another, who's responsible for paying whom. And that's where the big breakdown here is. The other thing is Netflix is currently delivering video to ISPs using 3 different types of CDN networks, using all different types of providers in that ecosystem. So the easiest way to think about it is that Netflix has a lot of options for delivering video to the ISP. The ISP itself, Comcast, Verizon, whoever it may be, does not control how Netflix sends that traffic to their network. What they do historically is they use middlemen who are called transit providers. So you've read a lot about Cogent. Cogent is a transit provider. So the way it works very simply is Netflix has their own servers that are sitting in third-party co-location facilities. They buy transit, they pay Cogent for that transit, and Cogent gives Netflix a guaranteed level of quality. Cogent then goes to level 3 and says, we want to connect to your network for free. Comcast will let them connect for free under what's called settlement-free peering. However, all transit providers have to abide by the peering policy that ISP has. So if you go to comcast.com/peering, you can see Comcast peering policy. Comcast treats Cogent just like any other transit provider. When the transit provider wants to send more traffic than the peering policy allows, that transit provider has to pay for it. However, Comcast has been very adamant, and their CEO still to this day is going out and saying we should not have to pay. It's interesting to note that Cogent has also had 8 or 9 other public disputes like this over transit with ISPs, but other transit providers haven't. So it's really an issue of where Cogent is trying to push everything to Comcast and blame Comcast. And Comcast basically has cut Cogent out of the deal, gone to a mutual interconnect agreement with Comcast directly. So it's Comcast and Netflix directly, cutting out Cogent, which does 2 things. It increases the quality for consumers, and it lowers Netflix cost.
So I think one of the things that people assumed is that this was bad for, this is an anti-net neutrality agreement, because I think the assumption is that Comcast squeezed Netflix and made them pay more than they would have otherwise. And I think many of us feel like, well, I pay Comcast. Shouldn't my access to Netflix be the same as everything else? Is Comcast next going to ask YouTube for money? Or
they've already cut those deals. So a lot of people in the media said this is the first time a deal like this has been done. It's factually inaccurate. Back in 98 and 99, we were covering in the market when guys like AOL and Yahoo were cutting deals like this with ISPs. So Microsoft cuts these types of deals, Google cuts these types of deals, AOL does, Yahoo does. This isn't new by any sense of the means. Also, keep in mind what you're paying your ISP for. You're paying your ISP for that last mile piece to the internet. However, the ISP does not control the content that's coming into their network. The content owner, CDN, controls that. So Netflix controls where they ingest it into the ISP's network, which transit provider they use, how many different links they connect, what the quality of service is with that transit provider, and what they're willing to pay. Now, an interesting thing to note here is if you have an Apple TV box and you're on Comcast, you don't have a problem. Why is that? Well, the reason is that Level 3 and Limelight Networks, which are third-party CDNs, are doing the delivery of Netflix content specifically for the Apple TV box because Netflix has made the decision of how they get content to specific devices on specific networks.
That's interesting. So I can use Comcast on an Apple TV and get better Netflix?
Yes, right. And Comcast doesn't control that. Netflix controls it. So people don't realize that Netflix is the one who controls this stuff.
So there are a couple of reasons that I believe the notion that Comcast was squeezing Netflix. First, of course, because Comcast is in the same business. They stream movies via StreamPix. So it made sense to me it might be an anti-competitive move. But the other one is that Netflix offers this Open Connect CDN, which many ISPs are members of, but not Comcast and not Verizon, by the way. Verizon's going to also...
And not AT&T.
And not AT&T.
Warner. And, yeah.
So why would Comcast not just do that?
Well, what people don't understand, again, about Open Connect. Open Connect is a program. If you just Google Open Connect, you can go to Netflix page. Open Connect is a program where Netflix places servers that they own and operate inside the last mile of the ISP. Now, the idea is, okay, just the ISP should let us come in, place our own hardware in there, let us control it, let us manage it, and it's completely free to the ISP. It's not free to the ISP. The ISP has to give you space, they have to give you power, they have to give you handoffs, they have to give you engineering resources. It's a direct cost to them. Now, guys like Google Fiber, Cablevision, CenturyLink, they've agreed to Open Connect because they feel it makes sense for the business model that they have. But keep in mind that Google
perhaps for
Fiber,
their customers too.
for their customers too.
Let's not forget them.
Absolutely. But Google Fiber has less than 1 million subs. Comcast has more than 20 million. So we're comparing two completely different ISPs in terms of size and shape. So each ISP has to look at what makes the most sense for them. Do they want to connect via paid peering? Do they want to do transit connections? Do they want to do third-party CDNs through Akamai, Limelight, Level 3, and Edgecast? Or do they want to do Open Connect? There's a lot of options in the market.
So Dan, can I ask you something?
Sure.
So let's say this particular arrangement doesn't actually have anything to do with net neutrality, but it seems as though what got people was the sense that Comcast is becoming too powerful and its control over the last mile in so many places is too powerful, and that customers are going to suffer, or that the internet in general is going to suffer. What do you think of that? Would you agree with that?
Well, so here's what I've said quite a bit publicly for a long time is I'm a firm believer that more choice in the market is good for consumers when it comes to telecommunication services and wireline services. I mean, I've always seen from this industry from 15 years ago when we had more providers in the space. If you think of the days when Real Networks was around, Real Networks and Microsoft were battling it out over the video war. And as a result, they added so many new improvements to their player and their platforms every couple months. They were eager to outdo one another. So I think it's better that we have more options in the market instead of less. But now we're talking less about net neutrality and really talking about the whole Time Warner merger.
Well, and the duopoly that the FCC has foisted on the American public, that most people in the U.S. can only get internet service from one cable company and one phone company.
True.
And there is no competition. So Comcast, I'm a Comcast customer. If I'm not happy, I don't have a choice.
Right, which is Matthew, where it is one way or the other. It does become a net neutrality argument in the broader sense, is what I'm arguing. I sat in rooms in Silicon Valley way back in the day when At Home argued for premium peering arrangements. And what was evident then, that's still evident now, is there is a moral hazard here. And the moral hazard is those who pay me, those who do a deal with me, those who let me control will get better service. And so the issue here isn't so much the specifics of this case. The issue that I'm arguing is that FCC, you've got to step in and set principles. And
well, now we know that the FCC under Tom Wheeler isn't going to.
That's what I fear. That's my problem with all this. That's why I
they're
say
going to keep an eye on things.
Yeah.
Right. You're talking about a bigger picture. I mean, the other interesting thing to note here is keep in mind that Netflix never had any quality of service issues of any kind until they decided to build their own CDN. Why did they do that? When they were using Netflix, Limelight, and Level 3 and splitting traffic amongst all three providers for years, we didn't have these problems because the CDNs are already connected to the ISPs. That's what they do. That's their whole business. So Netflix made a business decision to stop using third-party CDNs, build their own servers, get co-location space, buy transit. Why did they do that?
Well, that's an interesting question. Are you saying that among the ISPs who participate in Open Connect, there are QoS issues? It's only on the ISPs who are not participating in Open Connect. Am I right?
Well, no, because keep in mind, it's based on transit. So if you're a content delivery network, think Akamai or Limelight, Level 3. What you're doing is you're buying transit from multiple providers. There's about 15 major transit providers out there. You're probably buying transit from half of them. And what you're doing is anytime there's an issue, in real time, you're watching the performance of that video. In real time, you are using multiple providers to get around any type of bottlenecks you have. And that's why the CDNs really worked so well. That's why Netflix and everybody else was using CDNs. And today, everybody who doesn't build their own CDN is using third-party CDN networks. So Netflix decided they wanted to take more control and try and put servers inside the last mile. And in places like Europe, Open connected really well. In Europe, Netflix was able to stop using third-party CDNs for almost all of their video delivery because the ISPs in Europe said, okay, you can come into our network and play servers. In the US, the large ISPs didn't go for that.
Well, why did it work so much better in Europe?
Because they went for it. There's no issue of transit if you're in the last mile. There's no issue of transit. You're there. You're delivering the content from the ISP's own operations center.
Well, yes and no. Well, sure, transit's not involved, but you still have QoS issues inside the last mile.
Well, that's my question. Do you?
Yes, absolutely. That's why SLAs exist.
So you're saying that with Open Connect, they didn't solve the QoS issue?
No, Open Connect did not solve the QoS issue by itself, no.
Is that because they had to transit the information to the Open Connect servers in the...
So Open Connect is two different things. Open Connect is a platform, but Open Connect is also... There's two ways to think of Open Connect. Netflix has their own servers running Open Connect platform, which are sitting in third-party data centers like Equinix, which are then connected to transit into ISPs. That's Open Connect.
Okay.
But Open Connect is also the server with the software on it that goes inside a place like Google Fiber or Cablevision.
Right.
The other story we're not talking... Oh, sorry, Matthew, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wondered, you asked the question, why did they build their own? Why do you think they built their own?
I think primarily they wanted to have more control. If you look back at what Netflix talked about, one of the VPs who really spearheads the whole content delivery at Netflix last year came to our show and did a 30-minute presentation, which I just posted on my blog yesterday.
Yeah, see it here.
Explaining, here's what our approach is to the market. Here's why we want to do it. Also, this is the second time Netflix has tried to build their own CDN. In 2007, they tried to build their own CDN, and they failed, and they went back to using CDN providers. So this isn't the first time they've tried this and had problems.
My question is, do they fail because there's a technical issue, or do they fail because Comcast and Verizon and others don't want them to succeed?
Well, it's not a technical issue, but they failed because the business model that they had at the time didn't work for every single provider, and not every ISP is the same size. Now, keep in mind, too, people say, okay, you know, Comcast doesn't want them to benefit in any way. But if Comcast were to do that, Comcast would also lose subscribers. That doesn't help Comcast's business. And then you have ISPs who don't compete.
By the way, that's the question. Would Comcast lose subscribers? Or would Netflix lose subscribers and then Comcast serve content from another content company that was more cooperative with Comcast's business model?
That implies that subscribers have somewhere else to go.
Right. It's a monopoly. So who's gonna lose business? Comcast? They can't. It's a monopoly. Netflix, they can, because there's other competitors out there who may well have deals with Comcast.
And that's the other issue with the merger, which you mentioned, is that Comcast is in a killer negotiation position with all content holders.
They're dominant. So
this agreement we're not talking about.
This agreement with Netflix and Comcast does include an SLA now, right? They have a service level agreement.
2 SLAs.
Yeah. So from the point of view of Netflix subscribers on Comcast, they're going to be happy.
Yes, not overnight. It's going to take a couple of weeks, but yes, they're going to be happy, and the price isn't going to go up because Netflix is actually saving money.
That's an interesting point. And I understand this is tough. Netflix is now 32% of all bandwidth during primetime in the U.S. So, I mean, you talk about big, you talk about dominant. A third of all the bandwidth in primetime in the U.S. is Netflix traffic.
Yeah.
So I understand why this is an issue for everybody. Is it really Cogent that is being intransigent here? Cogent says we will not pay anyone anything.
Well, that's the problem. That's not the way the business works. So Cogent wants to be a transit provider like everybody else out there, but wants to be treated special. They don't want to have to play by any of the rules that every other transit provider has played by for 20 years. And it's one of the reasons why the vast majority of the major CDNs out there absolutely refuse to buy transit from Cogent because they're so difficult to deal with.
Why does Netflix use them?
You'd have to ask Netflix. Netflix doesn't just use Cogent, though.
Right.
Keep in mind that they buy transit from multiple providers. The 2 major ones that they buy for are Cogent and Level 3.
Right.
I'm interested that European ISPs went for this deal, but American ISPs didn't. What is the crucial difference?
I don't know offhand. I haven't spoken to a lot of the European ISPs, but one thing to think about is that the vast majority of Netflix traffic is still inside the U.S. So there's more problems delivering video inside the last mile here simply because of the capacity, whereas in Europe, there's not as much traffic being delivered to those ISPs, and they're not having as much of an issue with it.
The other story, I mean, pardon me while I'll stay up in high altitude, low oxygen. The other story I think not being discussed as part of this is a copyright story, is that the need to resend the same movie over and over and over again rather than being able to use better technologies like peer-to-peer technologies, the amount of streaming that occurs through BitTorrent now, and yet it's not really available on the commercial side of things. And so that's, an issue too, is that the legal situation is stopping us from finding efficient transit for content in ways that I think we could fix if we could sit down and figure that out.
Well, P2P technologies doesn't work very well for something like Netflix because of the content protection. So P2P
that's exactly what I'm saying.
That's what Jeff's
Dan,
saying.
That's precisely what I'm saying.
Right.
If we could fix that and get around content protection, but get in a way that still protects the holder, it's the same absurdity.
Netflix has to stream a single copy of each movie for each subscriber.
User.
Right. And so what happened with, for example, on a different level, on the DVR level, the virtual DVR, it was Cablevision that was the first cable company to experiment, with a legal shot across the bow to say that we're going to keep a single copy. If you're all watching Big Bang Theory, rather than having to record the same exact show 100,000 times, we'll record it once, but you'll have the rights to record it and the rights to watch it. So we have to get to a rights management structure. What we're doing right now is an insane and wasteful kludge around antiquated copyright laws. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I would agree. The biggest problem outside of copyright, the biggest problem we have in the industry as a whole is there's no standards. There's no standard video format, bitrate, codec, aspect ratio, player, protocol, nothing. And the only way you're going to have that is you need Apple, Microsoft, Sony, Google. You need all these guys to work together. And the problem Netflix has is they have to take one piece of video and transcode it 25 different times, times 50,000 videos, and then build a separate player or app for every single device in the market. That's crazy.
We're talking with Dan Rayburn. He is Executive Vice President of StreamingMedia.com, and it was his post on the Streaming Media blog that caught my eye on Monday, and I'll fall on my own knife, saying that the media got this story very wrong. And, of course, you can see why. It's a pretty technical story, and Dan himself, even though this is his beat, said he had to ask some network providers for clarification in some cases. But your salient points are that these commercial interconnects are how the internet works. It doesn't have to do with net neutrality. Do you not feel that Comcast in any way has put the squeeze on Cogent and or Netflix?
No, because what people don't understand is Cogent is selling a service to Netflix, and they're guaranteeing a level of quality. And then they're going to Comcast and saying, even though I've sold a service I can't deliver, you need to give me more access to your network than I'm allowed to have via your peering policy. Oh, and by the way, give it to me for free.
Right. And by the way, this is it does seem. And by the way, this is something Verizon is dealing with as well, and you can expect a similar result.
Verizon and AT&T have already publicly stated that they will do similar deals with Netflix shortly. Yeah.
Is Netflix happy with this deal?
Absolutely. Their cost goes down, the quality goes up.
So, if it were a net neutrality issue, the first thing you'd expect is that Netflix would be upset. The second thing you'd expect is Netflix competitors to say, well, you see,
that's the issue,
we're disadvantaged.
Netflix can be happy to do this deal. What about you?
Right.
What happens if you're expected to do things that you can't do?
Well, the fact that Netflix is okay with it doesn't mean it's not a competitive problem, right? They've just paid the guy who controls the pipe for access to your house.
If I couldn't get these at Netflix for my cable at some point, there's gonna be riots in the street.
Right.
So Netflix knows that.
Here's the problem, though. It's not competitive because you don't go out and build your own CDN unless you're the size of scale of Apple, Microsoft, Netflix. There's less than 10 guys who built their own CDN out there. So if you want good quality video and you're smaller and you can't cut a deal with Comcast like Netflix can, you use a third-party CDN like Akamai or Limelight or Level 3 or Edgecast, and you get the same level of quality at a cheaper price because you're a smaller provider. So it's definitely not a competitive issue.
So just bottom line, you say I should watch Netflix on Apple TV?
Well, for right now. Now it's going to get improved.
Let's get to the important point.
So.
Yeah. Chromecast, is that a good choice?
Well, Chromecast isn't really a streaming box per se. Chromecast is really different than, say, a Roku or Apple TV.
Okay, you're right. How's Roku? Is it good?
Roku's the best box in the market in terms of content choices available. If you go to streamingmediadevices.com, you can see a breakout chart of all the devices in the market and all the content choices they have.
Is the throughput good, though?
Well, that's not on the Apple TV. So, but I don't think you have to worry about that because now that the deal's signed and it's already underway,
it's going to be good on everything.
Within a couple more weeks, all this will be gone.
Yeah. And then poor Voodoo will have to suffer.
Walmart? Yeah, I don't know that anybody really cares about Walmart, to be honest.
I mean, to me, that's kind of the issue, is that the other streaming companies competing with Netflix now need to make the same deal, don't they?
Well, they don't, because keep in mind, Hulu doesn't run a CDN. Hulu uses Akamai, Limelight, Level.
They've made those deals.
Right, and the CDNs already have transit in place through providers to get into the ISP.
And that's why it doesn't affect me, Jeff, because I don't have my own CDN. I am on Ustream and Justin and BitGravity, and those providers have deals with, I presume, Level 3 and others.
Yes.
Okay, well, I think, Dan, you have made everything clear as mud, but it's not your fault because it is really complicated stuff, although you've done the best job explaining it I've heard yet, and I think you've made a strong case why this is a separate issue from net neutrality. I'm not going to go so far as to say it doesn't impact net neutrality, but it is a separate
that's
issue.
the proper way to say it.
Right.
Yeah.
But I think you could see, given what Dan described, you could see the sort of pinch points if Comcast starts tightening the screws on those CDNs and on those providers who are pushing stuff like from Netflix. If that starts to become an issue, that's where Comcast control over that last mile.
Remember, they can't put the screws on them, though, because Netflix has a guaranteed SLA with Comcast that's covered for multiple years.
Yeah, that's the key that they got in this. They got a service level agreement that guarantees them a certain performance.
Right. And I'm not thinking about Netflix specifically. I'm thinking about other content providers. I mean, companies like Netflix are always going to be able to cut deals. I'm concerned about companies that we've never even heard of or content providers that come up that are new. You know, if that starts to be a bottleneck where Comcast controls the access to that last mile, that's a potential problem.
Well, no, because they don't have the traffic that a Netflix has. So there's no bottleneck there because there's no throughput issue. So if you're an up-and-coming video company, your traffic is so small that you wouldn't want to cut a deal with Comcast because you're not running your own servers. You're not a CDN.
By the way, apparently Comcast is going to go to Cogent and ask them for money too still, right? This doesn't eliminate that problem.
Well, sure it does. Cogent's not going to be the middleman between Comcast and Netflix anymore. So the money that Netflix was paying Cogent's not going to get that money over time. Cogent has come out and said that about 2%, around 2% of its total revenue comes from Netflix. But the interesting stat is somewhere between 70 and 80% of all the traffic on Cogent's network is from Netflix. So what does that tell you about the business model that Cogent is in, or any transit provider? It's not a great business.
Dave Schaefer, who's the CEO of Cogent, told Ars Technica, and maybe this is his spin on it, that Comcast wants everybody who they can possibly extract a payment from to pay them, even though the traffic that's reaching their customers has been paid for by their customers.
Well, it hasn't been paid for by their customers. Right. It's been paid for by Netflix to Cogent.
Right.
Not by the customer.
Right. So he's kind of, it sounds like, intentionally misrepresenting the situation.
Yes, but Cogent's been doing that. If you look, just Wikipedia Cogent, one of the first things that comes up is here's a history of all their major peering disputes with AOL, Teleglobe, France Telecom. The list goes on and on.
It's really interesting. Wow. Hey, thank you, Dan. I really appreciate your taking the time. And if people want to read more, Dan Rayburn's column is at streamingmediablog.com. And lots of good information there. For instance, prices on transit.
Right.
Which apparently is as low as $1 a megabit. A lot less than it is in other countries. Japan, $25.
It's even lower than that. So transits, and maybe that's something to also just quickly cover. Is there's been reports out in the media that Comcast wanted $400 million from Netflix for this deal, which is absurd. And then there was some that was saying, well, the deal size to Comcast is $25 to $50 million per year. That's not accurate either. Last year, Comcast went on record to say that the amount of revenue they got company-wide for all of these beneficial interconnection agreements that are paid was between $30 and $60 million between all content orders. So total. That's public record. So Netflix is not paying $50 million to Comcast for this.
Right. But they might be paying a significant fraction thereof.
Well, they're paying. You could run the numbers, look at how much capacity they need, and look at transit pricing. And it's not transit pricing you could use as an estimate, because keep in mind Comcast is giving Netflix wholesale pricing.
Right.
But it's not the numbers people are putting out there.
I just looked up Susan Crawford's Twitter feed, because Susan, I think, is brilliant on these issues, and she wrote a book called was a Captive Audience, I think, about the Comcast. And she's one little fact here, which just gives you an idea of the changing business. Comcast's numbers for the periods of 01 to 05 versus 09 to 13, revenue up 112%, but CapEx up 14%. And her point is that Comcast is now in a position where they're not investing more in growth of capital. They're harvesting the incredible market position they have. And so, we hear sometimes that cable is is great for cash flow, bad for profit. But the gross revenue, the gross profit on internet access and such as that is very, very high. And when you own the monopoly, this is where the business starts to go. So the dynamics of the business start to change for Comcast, and that's what's worth watching here. Is that this is just one very small part of Comcast's business, but Comcast is worth watching.
Susan Crawford's Twitter feed is S. Crawford if you want to follow along. And as you mentioned, her book is called Captive Audience. Thank you, Dan. Really appreciate your time.
Thanks, you. Dan. Appreciate being here.
Really interesting stuff. We'll have you back soon.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's nice to have an expert on this. And we've been trying really hard to get people like Milo Medine, who runs Google's Gigabit project and was formerly Comcast at Home.
And formerly at Home, yeah.
Yeah.
They're not going to come and talk about it.
No, they don't want to talk about it.
No, not going to happen.
I think we have a shot at Dane Jasper at SonicNet. He's been very outspoken on all of this, too, and we will continue to cover the story.
He actually responded, Dane Jasper, and his thoughts are in the note.
Good.
So
he couldn't be here, but he did send us
he did send a little blurb on his thoughts.
All right, well, we'll talk about that when we come back. Thanks, Dan.
Thanks, guys.
Take care. We will continue This Week in Google. Lots more to talk about. This is, I think, a great subject, but Google's been kind of busy, too. So we'll talk about that, too, in just a bit. Matthew Ingram is here from GigaOM. Great to have you, as always, Matthew. And, of course, Jeff Jarvis from New York, New York. Our show today brought to you by Personal Capital, a great place to go if you want to build your wealth. Who doesn't, right? You got to plan for the future, plan for your retirement at the very least. Personal Capital puts all your accounts in one place, so you can see how you're doing with all of your financial information, your stocks, your 401k, your bank accounts, your charge cards, your mortgages, your loans. Very hard to follow all that since it's always on many different sites with different usernames and passwords. And if you're paying somebody to manage your money, this is great too, because you can not only see if you're overpaying, but you can get financial advice. Personal Capital offers free software to let you know where your money is, see all your accounts in one place in real time, make better wealth management decisions, and get objective financial advice from some of the best people in the business. Your financial dashboard tells you everything about how you're doing and where you're overpaying, for instance, on fees. The mobile apps are great. And then, of course, the financial advisor. The best financial advisory services, too. All of this for free. Visit personalcapital.com/twig to sign up for your free account. I've been using it for, well, more than a year and very happy with it. personalcapital.com/twig. Finally, your whole financial life in one single place. And we thank them for their support of This Week in Google. So it's in the notes. Where's the notes? Do we have notes?
If you hover over that cell that says that it has the note in it.
Oh, there it is.
That's a note.
So Dane Jasper, who some of you, we're learning how to use Google Docs today.
This fancy technology stuff.
Tooltips.
Always wondered what that was.
Look at that. Just you hover over it.
Hello. That's what you call it.
Dane is a friend of the network. He's been on many times before. He's regular on This Week in Enterprise Tech, and is the CEO and founder of SonicNet, which is an independent internet service provider that is one of the best in the country, consistently ranks top in protecting its users. I just think they're a great company. And it's local, you know, it's just up the road a piece. So he's been a really good advisor for us all. And he has a car with a license plate Linux. So that's a good thing. Writes, because you asked him about all of this.
Right. We wanted to get an interview, and he said he couldn't be available,
busy,
but he sent over the...
He says, it's an interesting development. One thought worth discussing may be whether an evolution of the internet into a two-sided model where both subscribers and content providers ends up, which is what we're moving, in some ways, moving towards. You know, you pay for internet access, and then the people who get to you pay for their access. And it doesn't have to be that the burden is on me, because it goes upstream to your transit providers and your CDNs. But he says the question is, does this may benefit large incumbents? If a competitive entrant can't get content to pay them something, while the incumbent is collecting money which subsidizes internet access, what happens?
Well, and this is the key issue. I got into two discussions with Andreessen on Twitter.
P. Mark has been going crazy on this.
Amazing.
Yeah,
he doesn't want any government regulation.
Right.
No, I'm not sure that's true.
Oh, okay.
Well, but Matthew wrote about this, and he'll give us a summary in a second. But I think that the issue remains that we don't have a competitive marketplace.
Right.
And we all want a competitive marketplace, except those who are incumbents in the non-competitive marketplace. And there's disagreement about how to get there. And do we need some steps along the way, like regulation, to protect the consumers who are stuck in a monopoly? But even those of us who, and I think Susan Crawford would be included in this, who at some level believe that there's some need for some regulation along the way, the ultimate solution is competition. No question about that.
Well, and that's and you can see why this would worry Dane, because he's a small guy relative to these guys, although he's becoming bigger, and he worries that he just cannot compete, or new people you never see a new internet service provider because the incumbents have all the deals, and it's sewed up.
You have states passing laws preventing cities
from
creating their own competition.
Right.
And that's something the FCC should be like. That should not be allowed. If it's not easy for a region or a city or whatever to fund or to help develop their own competitive internet service, that's a serious problem. Then you're basically just relying on Google Fiber to solve all your problems.
So let's talk, because, okay, so Mark Andreessen's, it's weird to have a debate in 140-character chunks. Probably not the best format.
No,
he's an expert at it, though.
He manages to get a lot get a lot in there. His Twitter handle is PMARCA, P. Marca. You should follow him.
So he did it, and then today Kenny Lehrer, who's an investor and stuff, did his own little list, and now there's mockeries of their lists going on.
Yeah.
So
but you know what he didn't do? What Mark does really well is respond. If you notice, if you go back through the thread, it's not just him posting thought after thought after thought. People challenge him and then he responds. That's the crucial difference, and that's where it becomes much more of a debate or a discussion than just.
So it started with a remark from Matt Iglesias, who was a former Slate writer and now writes for the new First Look Media, Pierre Omidyar's project. The internet was nice while it lasted. And he links to an article on The Verge. Actually, I don't know if this is... We're trying to get Nilay Patel as well on this, because he links to Netflix's paying off Comcast for direct traffic access. And I love Nilay Patel's article from last year. I can't say the name of it out loud. The internet is effed, in which he goes into greater detail about everything's screwed up. So Iglesias says the internet was nice while it lasted. And then Mark Andreessen responds, suppose... Well, I'm going to let... Matthew, you wrote this great article, so I'll let you do it, because I'm referring... Why should I read you your article? You wrote it.
All I did was try and take some of the tweets and put them into context, because it is hard to follow.
Yeah.
It's if you see one or you see them out of order, and then you have to go back.
He basically wrote the Bloomsday book for Mark Andreessen's tweets.
Yeah. So I turned it into a blog because he obviously didn't want to or didn't have time.
He finally did. He finally did.
Yeah, he finally did. He did one on media.
You beat him, as usual, Matthew. You beat him to it.
So his point was, and I talked with him a bit about this after I wrote it, and then I tried to include some of his responses, and just a sort of never-ending process. But his main point was not so much that he doesn't want or think there should be some regulation. What he's afraid of is that if it's just your common carriers, and so you have to do whatever we tell you, that Comcast and other providers aren't going to invest, and not just Comcast and other providers, but new companies aren't going to invest the money that's required to create competition.
One quick second, Matthew. That's why Susan Crawford's little data point there is really interesting. They ain't investing.
Right.
Go ahead.
And so he admitted that he doesn't actually know how to produce the competition that he wants to see. It's just his fear is that if there's too much regulation, it's going to disincentivize anyone from providing the bandwidth that we need. And his sort of vision of the future is we have 1,000 times the bandwidth we have now. We're all doing virtual reality, 3D teleconferencing and whatnot. That's kind of the future he wants to get to. So it's not so much about who's providing our Netflix shows right now. It's about who's going to provide the massive quantities of bandwidth that we need in the future.
And he's tried to say something. I didn't understand his point. Maybe you did, Matthew, where he would say, well, okay, it's one matter if you're talking about this today, but if we have 100 times the bits traversing, then that becomes very different, kind of who pays. And isn't that the classic argument that no one's going to build this unless they get paid twice? But the truth is the internet has gotten faster and faster, and rates have gone down and down. And we're taking advantage of Moore's Law here.
Yep. Yeah, and that's one good response is that, people have invested and they have, but we also have monopolies on those last miles. And now they're like you suggested with Comcast, they're basically harvesting, the fruits of that monopoly. So the question is how to get, so his analogy was the trucking industry, highways and so on. Let's say, Netflix is a company that's basically taking up 80% of the highways. Should they at some point have to pay more because they're using up so much of that?
Well, that's actually, I think that works against them, doesn't it? Because the highways are, number one, they're built by government and couldn't have been built by private industry. They were built by government controlling and contracting the private industry to do it, but government was clearly in control, A. B, if Netflix was filling 8% of the highways, they would only be doing that if there was a consumer demand for what they were carrying. And so the consumers would say, yeah, let's have more highways because there's a demand for it. If you can't get your whatever the goodies Netflix is carrying to you, that's an issue. They're not just going to fill the highways for the sake of filling the highways.
No, and so Dan Gilmore pointed out the highway issue that you just mentioned, which is that if we had relied on private industry, we probably wouldn't have as many highways and they'd all be toll roads. Right. So ultimately, he didn't get at the central issue, which is how do you take what we have now and turn it into something more competitive, and so that then new providers can be. And one of the things that a couple of people suggested, including me, was making it easier for local towns, municipalities, regions, whatever, to bring in competitive providers, to do high frequency microwave, to do whatever, to pull in fiber. Or bring in Google to something that can blunt the force of those monopolies.
There actually has been a movement. In fact, we've talked to a good friend of mine, Tim Pozar, who is an activist in the Bay Area for community internet. And remember, we talked to, who was it we talked to that was a big community internet supporter?
That was Ohm.
Well, Ohm has community internet in his apartment. It's a commercial thing, but it was the guy who one of the guys who wrote VisiCalc.
Oh, Bricklin?
It wasn't Bricklin. It was the other one. Can't remember his name. But this is his big thing now. Is it's completely doable technologically for groups, community groups, towns. To
Bob Frankston.
Bob Frankston is big in this community internet. Buy wholesale internet and wire their towns and eliminate this. And and that's the way to get competition. The cable companies really only have a monopoly thanks to the willingness of local communities to give them a franchise.
Exactly.
The local communities don't have to participate.
Andreessen also mentioned freeing up unlicensed spectrum, which is something that hasn't been happening as quickly as I think most people would argue it should. There's theoretically unlicensed spectrum out there that new providers could use to provide all kinds of competitive services.
Which I absolutely agree with and which is critical. But I'll go back to Susan Crawford once again because she's brilliant and I'm never wrong quoting her, is that yes, we want that, and yes, we need that, but she says that does not substitute for fiber. That what we're going to, if we're going to carry that 100 times more bits that Andreessen predicts, it ain't going to happen over mobile.
A lot of the fiber that is out there was built much like the Internet State Highway System by the U.S. government, or funded by the U.S. government. And it's not all commercial by any means.
Well, and you have to admit that a lot of the fiber that we're using that's super cheap was created by companies that went bust.
Yeah,
in the last
1999.
bubble.
Yeah.
And thank God they did, because they blew their brains out on all this fiber that we're now using super cheap. Maybe we need another bubble.
What about Mark? And by the way, for the young people, we need another bubble. Bubbles always build infrastructure. It happened with the railroads. It happened with the internet.
Electricity.
Yep. And bubbles are good in that respect. They're not wasted.
Bring back the bubble.
For those of you who are too young to know who the hell Mark Andreessen is.
Oh, that hurts me. You say that.
Oh, man.
Oh.
He was a graduate student at the University at Urbana, the University of Illinois, at the National Center for Supercomputing Applications, NCSA, in Urbana, and wrote one of the very earliest internet browsers, Mosaic, or co-wrote it. And then, of course, Mosaic was brought commercial as Netscape, made a lot of money when Netscape was one of the first big bubble IPOs. And
95.
95. It was the one that started the bubble, actually.
I started writing about technology stocks when Netscape went public, and I created a NetDex, as we called it, of early internet companies, none of which exist now.
That's awesome. And, of course, now he is a venture capitalist and runs Andreessen Horowitz. But it's still, I think, he's respected by everybody, not merely as a venture capitalist, but as a pioneer and a smart fella. He does have one idea. He tweets to you, Jeff Jarvis, one more practical idea: no discrimination on type or content of bits, just volume.
Mm-hmm.
And isn't that what we're talking about here?
Well,
it's not kinds of bits, but the volume.
Eisenberg came back and said, no, that doesn't work because video is volume. And so you can discriminate against video by yes, exactly.
True. Yeah, good point.
All your little slow bits, your little bits, no problem. But those big bits, gotcha.
Those are video.
That's good for us text people.
Right. Yeah. Gigaom's happy.
ASCII, man.
Words are very
ASCII
small.
I did like Stacey Higginbottom's suggestion that one thing we could do is get the FCC could do is to say to Comcast and others, you've got to reveal the details of the deals you're making.
Right. Right.
Transparency would help a lot here.
It sure would, because what do we know about those deals? We know the tiny little details the guys like Dan or whatever can uncover. What if there was a public auction market? What if it was all that information was publicly available? You could see who was bidding for space and who was selling. I mean, that in itself would make it more comprehensible.
Are all pipe dreams, though, really? I mean, there's so much money now going on. The FCC cannot be trusted to regulate this. The government can certainly not be trusted to regulate this. Any thought of making this more rational or better, is there any hope at all of doing that?
Very scared for the internet.
I hope so. I really hope
Maybe
so.
I'm just old and cynical and jaded. I just feel like...
Well, I think we have to sort of pick certain things. Like, you can shout at the FCC and say, you need to beat up on Comcast, but realistically, that's probably not going to happen. But I think it's much more realistic to say, open up some more spectrum. That's an easy thing to do. Make it easier for municipalities and regions to start or help fund competitive providers. That's a relatively easy thing to do. That's a low-hanging fruit.
Nilay Patel says the solution is to treat the internet as a utility, like water and electricity. And that's kind of what Bob Frankston was saying. Just as municipalities run water and electricity in most towns, they could run the internet.
Well, I wish Kevin Marks should be on here because he got into the argument with Andreessen and pushes the British model, which is that, BT is the mile to the home, and then there's open access across that.
Right.
Which seems to work pretty well and is non-discriminatory. But the issue then is BT going to invest sufficiently?
Right.
Will a Google Fiber come in then?
And Andreessen actually, at the end of the discussion, he seemed to agree that that was not a bad model, that if you had a kind of utility provider that was either wholly subsidized or partially subsidized, then you could have competing providers on top of that. but the sort of bedrock, the pipe, would be something that was either public or publicly funded.
Well, that's where we've gone to with electricity in the U.S. in a lot of states. Right. So I can buy the wire into my house is, whoever paid for it going in, I don't know. But now I can buy electricity from various players. I can choose to buy green electricity.
Right.
But it's all
and
just,
hydro.
Yep.
Yeah.
Hydro. Yes, of course. I salute to Canada. Hydroelectricity. Of course, I could do that too. Yes.
Lots of water in Canada.
We have tons of water. If you want any, we'd be happy to.
Oh,
send.
he does. He wants it. He needs it.
You know what else you got in Canada? Tim Bray.
True.
Google will not let him work from Vancouver, so he quits.
Yeah, I found that really surprising. I would have expected that from Yahoo, but I guess it surprised me that Google wasn't willing to sort of accommodate that.
Who is Tim Bray?
Geez, who's Tim Bray? He's a legend.
Tim Bray. He's a legend.
The Tim Bray.
The Tim Bray. He's quitting as of March 17th because he wouldn't move to California. He's a software developer, co-founded OpenText Corporation. He was one of the
XML spec.
authors of the XML spec. Yeah, he's kind of one of those. He's one of those guys, and his blog is down, man. Too many people are trying to read this story at tbray.org. I keep trying to pull it up, and I can't get it. Anyway, yeah, that's kind of a shame. But I also can understand, having been in the same position myself, how hard it is sometimes to have off-site employees. Just depends what you need that employee to do.
He did say he understood.
Yeah.
He said that he didn't blame them for making that decision. But it's interesting that his sort of love of Vancouver and his dislike of San Francisco just made it. He just couldn't bring himself to do it.
Google smartwatch. We thought we might see some announcements at Mobile World Congress. We did see new smartwatches from Samsung, the Gear, the new Gear, the Neo, the new Gear, and the Gear Fit. Actually, that Gear Fit looked pretty sweet. Kind of a curved band and so forth. Super AMOLED scrolling touch display. But no word of a Google watch, although the rumor is Wall Street Journal and others have said that LG will be making a Google Now kind of a watch for Google. Apple, of course, working on a watch too. Nothing to say.
Wearables, wearables.
It's just, I feel like any minute now, it's just going to all take off.
Are you going to get one, Leo?
I have a Pebble and was underwhelmed by its utility and its attractiveness, so I don't wear it. But on the other hand, if somebody made a nice-looking watch that did some of the things that the Pebble did, or I thought the Gear Fit looks pretty good. What are you wearing, Jeff? Are those? Is that Google Glass?
Well, yeah. So these are the lenses. I'm just realizing the first time I put them on during the show, and because it's curved, evidently that affects my prescriptions, and so when I watch you, you're all fuzzy now.
And you have to look up like that. Yeah,
which does not work either.
Yeah. But they look good. I got to say that looks pretty good. You don't look quite so dorky.
Well, dorkometer goes higher when you go over there.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, the big band on the right.
The funny thing was that I wore it in class this week, and the students, I thought I'd go, oh, it's cool. Can I play with it?
No,
I finally looked and said all of them. You're acting like I have cooties, and they said, yeah, you do.
Yeah, I knew that would happen. Everybody said, whenever I asked people for a year now, when I've said to people, oh, glasses, they said, oh, no, you walk down the street, everybody wants to see it and touch it. And yeah, that wore off. Now they just.
Jeff, did any of your students take a swing at you, like that lady at the bar?
I don't. Now we have a story in San Francisco of a lady in a bar.
Did that really happen? It doesn't feel like it really happened.
I think it happened.
I think it's oversimplified a bit in the news reports, but I think it's just simply that she was showing it to a friend. Somebody came over, and you can imagine what this is, and says, "Is that taking pictures of me?" Like, well, why would I? And then they got into us, and she said, I'm turning the video on now, and I'm telling you it's on, so you can tell it's on. And then the woman got all pissed off, was putting her hand up at it, and then there was some kind of fight around it.
Sarah Slocum wrote on her Facebook, OMG, so you'll never believe this, but I got verbally and physically assaulted and robbed last night in the city, had things thrown at me because of some wanker Google Glass haters, and then some bleep tore them off my face and ran out with them then. And when I ran out after him, his bleep friends stole my purse, cell phone, wallet, and everything. Wow.
I mean, this is a discussion we had last week in a sense, is that I think it's part of this larger San Francisco Google.
Maybe. A witness told the local news channel here the crowd was yelling, "You're being an asshole. Take those glasses off." She did manage to videotape it with her glass, and she says she's turned the footage over to the police. Something happened.
They're next going to be going through the streets of San Francisco, banging on and destroying all the looms.
Yeah. Is this the video?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, how does she must have gotten the glasses back.
No, I don't think the glasses were stolen. I think everything else was stolen.
I think they took the glasses, or the glass, but she got it back.
Oh, was that it? Okay.
I mean, my sense is, if you're going to be, and I'm not saying anything about her behavior, but if you're going to wear glass and be kind of really obvious about it late at night in a dive bar when people have had a lot to drink, it's probably poor judgment. I'm just going to say, I'm not blaming the victim here.
It's a punk bar, right? Molotov's is a punk bar. So I think you're kind of, I mean, do you know Molotov, Sarah? She goes there all the time. Is it a punk bar?
Matt Honan says it's not.
Matt Honan says it's not a punk bar. Sarah says, Sarah knows every bar in the city. What is it?
I mean, it's a non-techie bar.
Non-techie, there you go.
Where is it?
Lower Haight.
Oh, it's a punk bar. If it's in the Lower Haight, it's a dive. Don't go in the Lower Haight and wear glass. Oh, yeah, look at that. Oh, come on. Come on. You're telling me.
So that's all I'm saying. A little judgment maybe is required.
Yeah. I mean, we're not, look, if you were on Union Street and got beat up, then I'd say it was something there. I'm just being silly. Sarah's shaking her head.
It is interesting, though. I don't think this is going to be the last by any means. This is going to happen more and more often. The way
I think it was anti-Google, right? Because there's more footage in which a woman said, "Well, here, this is some more video." See, she keeps taping people as they're talking to her. Can you get my audio?
Expected to be officially on the market.
This is Channel 4.
Future. You may want to get accustomed to seeing people wearing that Google Glass item. As our tech reporter Gabe Slate here is here to tell us tonight, not everybody is comfortable when somebody's wearing Google Glass in their presence. Well, Gabe, why is that?
Well, Gabe, why is that?
I ended up saying, I can't believe this over and over again the whole night. I just was the only thing that could come out of my mouth. It was the weirdest event.
Sarah was out with her friends when they entered a bar in the Haight-Ashbury area in San Francisco.
It's kind of an art bar.
She captured through her Google Glass.
And we were there maybe about 15 minutes, and two girls that were there, they started showing a lot of animosity towards me because I was wearing Google Glass. And at that point, I turned on the video.
Oh, here comes.
On Glass, so I started recording.
So they're
them.
drunk.
I walked up to the bar, just saying like, "Oh, Google Glass," like, you know, just negative kind of comments.
Okay, Sarah, this is when you leave. You don't stay there and record it.
I wasn't even, you know, it wasn't on. I wasn't using it. You know, I mean, they clearly didn't understand it.
Well, wait a second. She has a right to be there and not to be harassed.
I guess you're right.
Grew and got more vocal.
But if
wait a minute, she says, "You're killing the city," but she says it with a smile.
See, yeah, but you see, that's the anti-Google.
Right.
According to the LA Times, the altercation accelerated, or after a friend who was with her took a swing at and/or punched someone who was heckling.
I do feel like there's more to this story.
Yeah, I agree.
And it's a little ginned up. You know what I'm saying? It's a little too much. Let me tell you. I don't know. Come on, glassholes. Knock it off. It's your fault. I do have to say, I feel a little bit like it's.
So are you kicking me off the show, Leo?
No. Here is a good. This is a good venue to. You should wear your Google Glass here. You're amongst friends.
Then I'm going to be like this the whole show.
Yeah.
These are progressive lenses.
Yeah.
And mid-range is there.
Sounds like you got the lenses were wrong.
It's the glasses, these are curved. So it all ends up different for me. In fact, when I look at my tablet, it looks like it's shaped like this. It's a problem. It's another problem.
According to Quartz, Google does not want to hire top college graduates. Actually, there was an interview with the New York Times' Tom Friedman, Google's head of people operations, Laszlo Bach. Hello, I'm Laszlo Bach. I'm head of people operations.
As opposed to the other man, my colleague, who's the head of robot operations.
He says Google has determined that your GPA is worthless as a criterion for hiring, and test scores are worthless. They don't predict anything. Wow. The proportion of people without any college education at Google has increased, not decreased, in time. Chad and I are going, yeah.
Yes.
Now as high as 14%. He says good grades don't hurt because many jobs at Google require math, computing, and coding skills. But he says people who come out of top colleges are kind of arrogant.
No kidding.
They lack.
But the funny thing was, Google at first insisted you only came from one of the top colleges, and only that you had perfect grades, and only that you had the highest test scores. So this is just so opposite of where they were. But this notion of intellectual humility, I quite like in this.
I do like that.
If you're intellectually hubristic, then you think that the great solution is because you're so smart. Yeah.
Well, and you think you know everything because they mentioned specifically that learning ability is one of the things they look for.
He says for every job, this is the quote, the number one thing we look for is general cognitive ability. That's not IQ, it's learning ability. The ability to process on the fly, the ability to pull together disparate bits of information. We assess that using structured behavioral interviews that we validate to make sure they're predictive. That's when it gets south for me. Huh? Press this button. Oh! I'm sorry. The second attribute after learning ability, leadership, in particular, emergent leadership as opposed to traditional leadership. Traditional leadership is, were you president of the chess club? We don't care. What we care about is when faced with a problem and you're a member of a team, do you at the appropriate time step in and lead? And just as critically, do you step back and stop leading and let someone else?
So your Skull and Bones membership is not going to cut it.
You know, I don't care. If they don't want me, I don't want them.
So now we're going to see people trying to hide the fact that they went to Yale. No. Community college. Some local place.
I'm telling you, I'm the best of all worlds. I went to Yale and I dropped out. So there. I knew when to step back.
You got in and then you said, is that all there is?
I was president of the chess club and then I quit. So there.
The interesting thing, though, is that Google, they do, you know, we can make fun of them for it, but they do a huge amount of sort of data analysis, even on stuff like this, like what people eat in the cafeteria, when they come in and when they leave, when the parking lot's empty and when it isn't. So I'm sure they've looked exhaustively at the performance of new hires and figured this out. It's refreshing in a way.
He also says that people who are the most successful here have a fierce position. They'll argue like hell. They'll be zealots about their point of view. But then you say, here's a new fact, and they'll go, oh, well, that changes things. You're right. He says you need a big ego and a small ego in the same person at the same time. These all, by the way, I would say these are 100% right. This is,
yes, they are.
If I could say what I was looking for when we hire here, it would be exactly this.
I can't remember if it was Keynes or somebody asked a famous economist like that why he had flip-flopped on an issue, and he said, when I'm presented with evidence that contradicts my views, I change my mind. What do you do?
Right. It always drives me crazy that we accuse politicians of being flip-floppers when, in fact, don't you want somebody who will listen to information and then adjust his opinion based on that information? No, I don't want to hear anymore.
Made up my mind.
I know what's true. In fact, maybe we should use this to elect politicians from now on. None of them would get a job.
Google.
Yeah.
Eric Schmidt for president.
Yeah. Talent could come in so many different forms, and be built in so many non-traditional ways today. Hiring officers have to be alive to everyone beside brand name colleges. Because when you look at people who don't go to school and make their way in their world, those are exceptional human beings. And and we should do everything we can to find those people. Wow. It is part of the debate these days. Should you even go to college? Should you incur the debt? And I'm saying this with a college professor in the room. Should you even incur the debt of a college when, when in fact many people say, including my good friend Don Tapscott, all college does is prepare you to, is groom you to be part of that class.
Yeah. Don, who's also at a university.
Well, he's a professor too, so.
Yeah. I got tenure, man. I ain't leaving. No,
I can say whatever I want now.
We absolutely need to be disrupted, like media and retail and other industries. We deserve it. We are, one of the things I learned in universities is we do a lot of talk here about outcomes, but we ascribe the outcomes to what we already want to teach. I tried to start a research project where we went in and did ethnographic research in newsrooms and startups to find these skills that are really in the marketplace and then back into what we should teach, but I couldn't get anybody to fund it.
You're actually good because you didn't come from academia.
Oh, no, I didn't. I have a bachelor's degree and I'm teaching master's students.
Yeah, perfect. You're the kind of professor they need because you come from the real world. So that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. It's the people who, come up through the system, they get all the degrees, and they never leave the school. They make their entire lives.
It's less the people than also the reward structures that get built around that, right? The cementing that occurs. Now, there's a reason for tenure. I was at a discussion of a bunch of people who had chairs. I don't have a chair. I'm sitting on a ball. I barely have lights, I'm lucky here. They turn them off like in Iraq. Anyway, folks, anybody here from out of town? Where was I?
I will always be a good audience. If you want to do shtick, just go right ahead.
So the chairs. So there was talk about a foundation from saying, let's get rid of this idea of tenure. And a couple of people in the room said, well, I wouldn't be able to do what I've done because I would have gotten fired long ago. And the truth is that when I came here to CUNY, the story that my former dean has told in his memoirs, Sarah Bartlett's predecessor, that I quit on the first day on the job. I was the first professor hired. That was announced in the New York Times. I start here. I have a faculty meeting that day about the curriculum, and I go in and I try to say the professors all need to be trained in new technology, and I get shot down and screamed at. Oh. And I say, oh, my God, I've made a terrible mistake. I let it fester for a week. I send the dean an email saying we both made a terrible mistake. I quit my job. I don't know what I'm going to do, but I don't want to be the thorn in everybody's side. And he came back and he said, what are you saying, you idiot? I hired you. That's a committee from the rest of the university. We're going to hire faculty who are going to do this. Are you crazy? And he was right, and I stayed, and thank God I did. But I said at the end of that, I was thinking that tenure was a horrible thing. Maybe we should talk about that. Because I saw what it was like to be controversial, to try to take a stand that the rest of faculty didn't like and what could happen to you as a result. And so for academic freedom, there is a rationale behind tenure, but as an entitlement. And the other issue we face, and this could be said of me too, in a field that changes so rapidly, should I stay here forever? Not unless I stay up.
I thought it was interesting that Nick Kristof, I know we're going off on a tangent here, but he talked.
That's what we do in the show, Matthew.
Yeah, he wrote a whole thing about, how it'd be nice if more people in academia took part in discussions about their field outside of, journals that only 5 people read. And he got a lot of pushback from academics about it, but I think his point was a good one, that there's a lot of potential knowledge and sort of useful debate and points of view that are locked up inside universities and inside journals, and it'd be nice if more of that was available.
Yet there was also a piece in, I think, Foreign Affairs, somebody saying none of the smartest people I know is on Twitter or Facebook, and only dumb people are there. And it was like Foreign Affairs.
Wow.
But that was the old horrible snotty attitude of I don't want to talk to the public. So the argument was all the biggest ideas, all the best ideas. No, you don't know those. You're not good enough to know those. Well, F that.
We don't have Gina to do a change log here, but I'll give you there is a new Google Plus coming. Look for it sometime in the next day. If you have 4.2, 4.3 will come out. Lots of new stuff, non-destructive photo editing across all your devices. So you can start an edit on one device and continue or start over on another. You can back up full resolution photos from your desktop, edit them on your phone, then finish on your tablet. I like that. New filters, new creative tools, crop, rotate, one-touch filters, Snapseed-inspired enhancements, a single view of all your photos, the All View, and I don't have it yet, so I can't show you this. The new All View displays your entire photo library, whether it's on your current device or backed up in the cloud. If your library is really large, the app won't show all your photos initially, but if it's more than 10,000 photos, but larger libraries over the next few weeks, and an easy way to browse photos by date. Swipe through your photos in All View, look for the scroll bar on the right, dragging the scroll bar up or down will move you backwards or forwards in time. So look for an update to, I think there was an update to the Google Launcher too if you're on a Nexus or Google Play device.
Oh. I didn't see one yet.
They're pushing their auto backup software too, right?
Yeah.
So there's your change log.
One story that's on there that I think there's a lot of discussion going online that a federal court just forced YouTube to take down that horrible, ridiculous anti-Muslim video over a copyright claim.
Oh,
yeah.
And so here's something that has major, if awful, news value, ridiculous news value. What it spurred and inspired. But now copyright is taking it down from public view.
It's a weird ruling. That was a really weird ruling because the judges decided, as far as I can tell, that because the creator of the movie had altered the work that this actress was involved with, had changed things, had added things, had changed the whole nature of the work, that effectively copyright reverted to her from the creator. And so then if she didn't want it,
that's even weirder.
Yeah, it's very strange. And the dissenting judge, you could tell, thought the whole thing was just ridiculous, at least from the parts.
Geez, if I could retain copyright for everything that an editor butchered.
Yeah, really?
Yeah.
That'd be nice, yeah.
I'd own a lot of worthless stuff, but I'd own it.
It was a 2-1 decision, Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. The dissenting judge, actually the chief judge who voted to pull down the video, said this is a troubling case. Actress Cindy Lee Garcia was duped into providing an artistic performance that was used in a way she could never have foreseen.
Artistic is a stretch for anything that was in that video.
But she did say from the very first, this is not what I thought I was acting in.
It's not what she, And he altered
that's a fraud case. That's a different case. That's not copyright.
It's not a copyright case.
So basically the judge said it was not a work for hire, right? Because that changes the rules.
Right.
So because it was not a work for hire, she only gave an implied license. And therefore, since they
she had been cast in a different film, Desert Warrior, but that film was never made. But the footage was then reused.
Well, it was
with her voice dubbed over with an anti-Muslim.
It was a sham from the beginning. There never was a Desert Warrior movie, but nobody was going to make the horrible anti-Muslim thing that they made. Right. So they just got people to shoot stuff so they could.
That does seem like fraud would have been better.
Fraud. Yeah, that's fraud. I'm not.
And our
was a schmuck.
Google, by the way, says that they strongly disagree with the ruling and will appeal.
And Jeff Roberts pointed out in our post, the dissenting judge said that it was a strained interpretation of copyright.
No kidding.
And added that the court had never made a similar ruling in any other case, and said that it could constitute prior restraint of speech. And that public interest would side with Google keeping it up.
Julie Ahrens at Stanford said the idea that a copyright is a tool that's going to be used to censor speech we don't like, that's very dangerous.
Yeah, it's pretty frightening.
And the other thing is it's going to bring attention back to this piece of junk, stupid thing that was by one schmucky idiot. And God help us, there could be more
Streisand effect. Yeah. Eric Schmidt's given $1 million to solve problems through technology. Seems like a paltry amount for a man worth.
Look the gift horse in the mouth, will you? Well, I think we argue
just $1
that
million.
technology scales, and so $1 million to technology is better than $1 billion to anything else.
I'll grant you that.
I wrote a post on Medium today arguing that this is part of the out of my trip to the Valley. And I get in trouble with people for this like crazy, because I'm saying that I would rather see philanthropists put money into scalability in journalism rather than just supporting more stories. And that scalability, innovation, investment in infrastructure and platforms and things like that is where I want to see the money go. And so all the nonprofit news things are coming after me and whining at me right now on Twitter. But
I think
I'm a
your point
guy.
Your point is a good one. If you just if millionaires and billionaires just give money to nonprofits, we're not going to see any new either technological innovation or sort of new platforms or new, because who's going to fund them?
Exactly. And so there's a competition for capital that occurs, and the capital, I think, should go to innovation and scalability, but that's boring.
I should correct myself. The Google Now launcher, which was previously available only on Google Play Edition and Nexus devices, now can be downloaded from the store for any device. So that actually is a big deal. They released the launcher that this is the beginning of what some have worried about, that Google would slowly release all the Google service applications to the store. And even if you didn't, you could basically replace your, crappy Samsung launcher and your crappy Samsung apps with all the Google apps.
Why is that worrisome?
It doesn't worry me. It seems like an improvement.
I looked at the S5, and I think I was in the rundown about how half the memory is gone with all the Samsung.
So this was a complaint I had with the Galaxy S4. And one of the reasons I didn't use it, I bought a 16 gig Galaxy S4, and I only had 9 gig free because of the cruft, uninstallable cruft that Samsung put on it. It's even worse, it turns out, on the S5, although Samsung didn't show off any of that cruft. It's 8 gigs free. So there's even more stuff on the Galaxy S5 that you can't remove that messes things up.
That's to help you, Leo. It's not corrupt.
Ugh, it's so
I want
awful.
to make your life easier.
I love the Note so much. I love that big screen, but I can't use it because I don't want to use Samsung's S Voice. I want to use Google Voice. I don't want to use Samsung's this and that. I don't want golf mode in my camera.
Golf mode.
So we have been talking about WhatsApp since it happened because it's just so stunning, that number, $19 billion. And we had heard a rumor that Google had offered $10 billion. Now word comes from Sundar Pichai, no, that's simply untrue. He said WhatsApp is an exciting product, but we never made an offer to acquire them. Press reports to the contrary are simply untrue. That's $10 billion would be a lot of money. Although
there were other reports that they would have paid more than Facebook paid.
Yeah. Apparently not.
And I'm kind of glad, to be honest. It sort of made me nervous when those reports first came out saying they had bid $10 billion and were prepared to match it and all that. I thought that's a crazy amount of money. I know Google has lots of money, but it's a crazy amount of money. It's crazy for Facebook, but at least whatever, Mark Zuckerberg has talked himself into believing that it's worth that.
Well,
he went to Mobile World and said it was cheap.
So it was worth more, yeah.
If you're going to spend that much money, you got to say that. You got to
20 billion, 30 billion.
I got a deal.
I don't care how expensive my $9,000 OLED TV was worth. It was worth twice the amount. I would have paid $20,000 for it. No, Facebook stock has already gone up enough to account for a third of that price. So, and that's the important point that people ignore. That $12 billion of it was stock, already inflated stock. And all it really, mostly what Facebook paid was dilution. They diluted their stock value is mostly what they did.
And Ohm pointed out when that deal came out that Cisco did very much the same thing in the last sort of movie, where they used their stock, which was incredibly highly valued, and they bought. I remember them buying a company. I can't even remember the name of it. There were like 2 guys and a scribbled network diagram on a napkin, and they paid $2.5 or $3 billion because why not? You know, it got
it's almost free money. Yeah.
Right, and it got something into their HQ and out of everybody else's hands. A couple of billion in stock. You know, 3 days later, they'd probably paid for it. So.
Yeah. WhatsApp will be adding voice calls, and that's going to be, you know, I think if you think about what it is, it's mostly they're paying $42 per user for 450 million users. Facebook itself is worth more than twice that, and you know, Instagram, they paid $45 per user, so it's really right in there.
And I think they were I don't know about now, but Mark Zuckerberg said they were adding 1 million users a day.
Right.
In some countries where they've never even heard of Facebook, or where Facebook is not used that much.
Rafat Ali at Skift said that every one of his relatives in India is on WhatsApp.
Yeah.
Yep. And it was interesting to watch when you talked about it, even on Twitter, and I talked to people in real life as well, and people who didn't either know someone or were related to someone in another country had never heard of it.
And that's why I'd used it, because I was talking to somebody in another country. It's exactly right.
If you knew someone or a relative or even someone who you knew who was from a different country, they use it all the time, literally all the time.
Yeah. I have an alternative to WhatsApp that people who are a little nervous about it now that it's owned by Facebook might be interested in. That's actually great. I'm not going to tell you yet because it's going to be my pick. It's going to be my tool of the week. So stay tuned for that. Couple more stories, and we will get to our tip and tool and number of the week. I thought this was a very good column, and I wanted to just point to it from codinghorror.com. Apocalypse Now. The author shows, and for some reason the image is not coming in on my browser right now, but he shows the thing you see every time when you visit on the browser a website for a publication. Install our free app. Yeah. Gosh, I wish this were. Here's an XKCD.
It's so right. It's not just that. It's, you know, we killed the pop-up, right? Remember when pop-ups were a new window? We killed that. Dead. And now site after site after site, I've got to, you know, I don't know how it works in HTML5 or what, but I got to go in and kill these goddamn little.
Oh, it's so annoying. Here's the XKCD cartoon. Want to visit an incomplete version of our website where you can't zoom? Download our app. And then you have two choices, okay or no, but ask me again every time.
So true. It's so true.
Yeah, this was I thought a very good article, and he really says, you know, yes, there are 1 million plus apps on the Android store, but how many of them are any good? Most of them, he says, 99% of them are awful junk nobody would ever want. And what he points out is, yes, apps are cheap, but the real cost is your time. He says, and I identified with this. How many times do you install an app and hover your finger over the uninstall button because you just know something's going to happen? You're going to say, no, get rid of that app now. So
it's a great piece. And you know, the point I think he makes that really hit me was this sort of vision of our at least near-term future where, and messaging is a great example, where you've got multiple sort of siloed, inaccessible, proprietary, platform-based, you know, things that don't interoperate. You can't share things between them. It's terrible, and that's the way lots of the internet was before we kind of got standards and before people decided to. I remember early chat with AIM and MSN and so on. It was terrible because you couldn't talk to someone unless they were. It's like not being able to make a phone call to someone unless they have a specific phone. You know, it's ridiculous, and we shouldn't stand for it.
More silos. When we had this great thing called the World Wide Web, the open, easily transportable web, it worked so great. I blame you, Steve Jobs. And by the way, the credit to Jeff Atwood, who is a co-founder of Stack Exchange and is a really great guy. And this is a great blog post, and I just wish the images were coming in. I don't know why they're not.
Yeah, I don't have them either.
Huh. Jeff, what'd you do? You messed up your code. Blog.codinghorror.com. The place to go. Yeah, I just wanted to say, you know, I agree. Been there, done that. And let's bring back the web. Such a good idea.
Yeah.
I don't see anything else unless any of you have something you want to talk about in the rundown. We have a first look from gigaohm.com at the Toshiba 13-inch Chromebook video. I'm not sure. Is this from Mobile World Congress? Kevin Toffel, who, by the way, is so great. Good acquisition.
He's really good.
Yeah.
He is great.
Yeah. $299.
Kevin got, I think it was Kevin got, no, somebody got here's the machine I'm waiting for. The affordable Pixel is going to be the Acer 720p, which has a touch screen.
Okay.
And it's going to have 4 gigs, not 2 gigs. That's hard to get. And it's going to have LTE.
Yeah.
I figure that adds up to about 500.
Yeah, I wish they'd make a mid-range.
Workable machine.
Yeah,
that's a workable machine.
There's just, we've mentioned this before. There's two choices. You got this crazy expensive Pixel or the ridiculously cheap $200, $300 netbooks, basically. But do something in the mid-range.
720p. There was a version with 4 gigs, and I put an order in for it. I'm not sure why, since I have a Pixel, but anyway, I put an order in for it on Amazon, and Amazon killed my order. And other people in the chat room said before the show that happened to them too. And so I guess it got pulled as a product. But 4 gigs in LTE and touchscreen, and you've got a mid-range Pixel.
And 9 hours of battery life, because the Pixel's battery life is not so hot.
Right, because now you have Haswell.
Yep.
And, you know, I think Google should make that, actually, to show what's doable.
We're going to take a break, come back with, if you wish, Matthew, to provide us with anything you like, a software you like, and something you want to tell people about, your pick of the week. I have a tool of the week, as I mentioned. Jeff Jarvis will have a number. Our show today brought to you by Squarespace.com. You saw the Super Bowl ad. They actually have some new ads now on the Squarespace site. A better web awaits. Let me show you the new one. This is No Detail is Too Small. I'm a big fan of Squarespace.
It were possible.
They say the difference between good and great resides in the details. Wow. This is something.
Passion. And beauty. That goes into what you do.
True. It's true. Your website is kind of the reflection of who you are and what you do, whether you want to do a blog, whether you're a professional photographer and you want a portfolio. If you want to sell, they do it all at Squarespace.com. And the sites look spectacular. Best thing you could do if you go to Squarespace.com right now is click the Get Started button. You'll see all the templates you can choose from. 25 beautiful designer templates. You're going to customize this, and it's very easy. You don't have to be a JavaScript or CSS junkie to do it. You don't have to know anything. Just point and click your way to a totally gorgeous website. All of them are e-commerce enabled, which is nice. All of them are mobile responsive. That means they look good at any size. Once you set up the site, you have 2 weeks to play with it for free. You can import all your content, really see what it looks like, change templates at your whim, use their logo design tool, which is very sweet. For small, you know, if you don't have a designer on staff, you can design a really great looking logo. They have wonderful apps. The Metric app for iPhone and iPad just came out, which lets you check site stats like page views, unique visitors, social media followers. You can blog right from their blog app. You can approve comments and so forth. Just gorgeous. And the hosting's done and the software too, and the price is right. When you sign up for a year as low as $8 a month, including a custom domain, you can even sell a product and accept donations. Great if maybe you want to do a cash wedding registry or a school fund drive. If you want to do full e-commerce, $24 a month. That's all. They don't take a cut. You can sell unlimited products, real-time carrier shipping, label printing via ShipStation, integrated accounting via Xero. You get the domain name and everything. Plus unlimited pages, galleries, and blogs, unlimited storage, unlimited bandwidth, unlimited contributors. Squarespace.com. I just want you to try it. Go there right now. Click the Get Started button. If you decide to buy and you see the price is right, I do ask that you use our offer code TWIG2 and you'll save 10%. So that's why a year or more is a really good deal. Use the offer code TWIG and the number 2 because we're in the second month, February, at Squarespace.com. Matthew,
well, let it be known.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Matthew Ingram had a good time at the Boston Park Plaza.
Oh, now how do we know that?
Because we know that from Twitter, and the hotel had a nice little conversation with them on Twitter. Very smart hotel. Hey, Matthew.
Never talked to a hotel before.
Yeah,
so
it's kind
I
of cool.
thought that was an interesting. Yeah, they said, "Did you enjoy your stay?" It took them a while because I think that was February 7th. But
so wait a minute. So you went to the hotel, you stayed there. Did they ask for your Twitter handle when you checked in?
No.
What if you had been there for an assignation?
Yeah.
I checked in on Foursquare.
Oh.
So I guess.
Okay. All right.
And but they knew to go to your Twitter account.
I think I shared it on Twitter.
Aha.
Yeah.
He's Matthew I on Twitter. And what did they say?
Just thanks for coming to stay with us. Did you enjoy the conference?
And Matthew, being the nice Canadian, said, "Sure did."
Oh yes, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Actually, I love Matthew's Twitter feed. I'm just reading your tweets now. Fred Wilson on Bitcoin. I always feel good buying when there's blood in the streets in any market.
That was a good one. I like
God, Fred. Reddit's adding a new real-time reporting feature.
Yeah, I thought that was an interesting one. I got a lot of feedback, mostly negative, on that. They've got a new feature that basically allows you to live blog a breaking news event.
Oh,
and
that's
you
neat.
Basically become the editor of that live blog, and then you can allow other people or bring in contributions from elsewhere into that live blog. So obviously everyone brought up the Boston bombing and how they identified
got it wrong and
whatnot. But, you know, so did CNN. So I still think more people doing those things is better. I keep going back to what Jay Rosen has said, you know, journalism gets better when more people do it. And so, yeah, I'm sure there's going to be screw-ups. I'm sure there's going to be mistakes, but we have those every day in the regular media, so why shouldn't Reddit be part of it?
And you use as an example the Ukrainian conflict Reddit live updates. This is a perfect place to do it. Why not?
And they actually have a great Syrian civil war subreddit that's run by a guy, I think he's a law student, and he runs 2 or 3 other subreddits, one about Venezuela, and they're excellent. Like the Syrian civil war one is really good. I would say it's one of the best resources about the Syrian civil war in any media form, you know, traditional, professional, amateur, whatever, next to Brown Moses and his blog and places like that. It's quite well done.
Wikipedia has done that for a little bit, for a while.
Yeah.
I mean,
and this is a similar model.
I think crowdsourcing news is not a bad thing at all, as long as you understand the potential pitfalls.
Yes.
Right.
But you know, a human mob can form anywhere, anytime.
Sure. And I think that lots of people said, well, they're going to make lots of mistakes, and how could that possibly be better? But if you look at what happens on Twitter, lots of those mistakes are corrected, and hoaxes are corrected a lot faster than they are in traditional media. So you've got benefits and disadvantages. Yes, there are more errors, but they happen faster and can be corrected faster.
I completely agree, and I think when it works so well that it just justifies any potential issues that come up. So there's a tip: follow Matthew on Twitter, MATHEWI.
1T, as I learned the hard way. Matthew slaps people like nuns with rulers to teach them. It's 1T.
Is that how you spell it for real, though, Matthew?
Yeah, it's only 1T.
See,
is there a story behind that, Matt, too?
No, not a comprehensible one. No, my mother, I asked her, when I was old enough to figure out that it was weird why she chose one, and all she could come up with was that she didn't want me to be called Matt. She hated the name Matt.
Well, now if you're called Matt, it's really confusing.
Well, right, and I said, you can't say the name Matthew so that it only has 1 T. So anyone who only hears it is obviously going to call me Matt. So that didn't really work. But she actually people would call our house and say, is Matt there? And she would say, no one by that name lives here.
Oh!
She would hang up. Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
That was fun.
Well, I've known you for I don't know how long years, and I didn't know. It's the first time I've noticed there was 1 T.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I felt sorry for the guy who was at Matthew I with 2 T's.
Yeah.
I think he's actually left Twitter because it just got too much. people at replying him instead of me.
Well, anything else you want to plug before we wrap up here?
I can't remember if I mentioned this before, but I use the Google photo backup thing reminded me of it. I use a service called Trovebox. It was originally called Open Photo. And I back up every photo from my devices to that service. And one of the interesting things about them is they integrate with Amazon's S3. So if you have an account there, which I do, it automatically, dumps all that stuff into S3 repositories. You don't have to worry about it. So you're not relying on them for storage. They basically just handle the uploading and handle all the other stuff. And then you can go to your Trovebox site and see all the photos and, turn them into albums or share them or whatever. It's quite simple, but it works really well. You prefer that? See, nowadays, Facebook, Google, Microsoft, everybody wants to give you free backup space. And I do that. I actually back them up to Dropbox and to Google, and in some cases to Facebook as well. But I like to have one that isn't isn't associated with a specific platform, that is just, me and Amazon cut a deal, and that's where my stuff is. So in case something happens for whatever reason. For the longest time, I was using Backupify, and they've kind of slowly dwindled in terms of things that they I used them too for a while. Yeah, so I'm looking for something else. Trovebox, I'll have to check it out. TROVEBOX.com. Thank you, Matthew. A number, Mr. Jeff Jarvis.
So my friend Chuck Martin, an expert in mobile, put up an interesting post on LinkedIn today with data from Monetate that says that in the last quarter, in the Christmas quarter, average order size from Android exceeded average order size from iPhones in e-commerce, $136 versus $126, reversing a previous trend, which I just found interesting because I hear complaints about, well, yeah, there's a lot more Android than iPhone, but I make more money from iPhone. I hear people say who make apps and such. So I found that interesting. It was at $2 billion in sales. Cyber Monday was the biggest the highest grossing online shopping day in history. Wow. 1 out of 3 visits to leading e-commerce websites now comes from a smartphone or tablet. I believe. And the tablet average size, as opposed to the $136 for the phones, the tablet average size order is $153. So it's more than anybody. Yeah. Wow. So that makes sense. Tablet users are affluent, lazy people. Yes. And they order more online. Yes. Actually, that makes sense. That's my numbers of the week. Thank you, Jeff Jarvis. We talked yesterday about secure messaging platforms on Security Now, and spent some time talking about Telegram. Telegram is a Russian secure messaging platform for Android and others that is funded by Pavel Durov, who is, according to Mark Millian, the Mark Zuckerberg of Russia, and claimed 1 million new users when WhatsApp was sold. A lot of people fleeing WhatsApp, apparently, because they don't trust Facebook. I don't know why. Telegram makes a big deal about being a secure, encrypted service, but Steve's analysis, and many others, as it turns out, is that this is far from secure. It's just bizarre, and he doesn't recommend it. But he did mention, and this all came up because of one of the critics of Telegram is a well-known cryptographer, security expert named Moxie Marlinspike. He has the most Dickensian name. What a wonderful name. Yeah, I don't know if it's his real name, but it's a great handle. And Moxie has a open source implementation of security, and his company, Open Whisper Systems, offers a free secure messenger, which Steve says is very good. I install it. In fact, I found it not only it's free, it's easy to use. It offers all the features of WhatsApp, group messaging, audio, video, text, pictures. But it's very easy to use, and in fact, I liked it so much I replaced my standard SMS app, and you could do this on Android, which is really great, and made Text Secure my default. So texting looks like regular texting on Text Secure, unless you exchange a key with somebody, and then all of your conversations are protected by strong encryption, stored on the phone encrypted, never spends any time on their systems, servers. I mean, it's true, strong encryption, and I have to say I've started using it now as my SMS. It's really great.
And it's, you know what? It does everything WhatsApp does. And the same company, OpenWhisper, does a phone service called Red Phone that is a secure voice communications. So if for some reason you're fleeing WhatsApp, this is a great alternate choice that is, in fact, secure.
Is it just for Android, Leo?
Right now, just for Android. They say they're doing an iOS version of it. And the nice thing about it is that the encryption technology is open and freely available. You can federate with them. So others could write apps that work with Text Secure using federation, which I even like better. It means you're not stuck with just one implementation of it. And Moxie's really one of the good people. So this is a great choice. Text Secure. Highly recommend it. My friends, we've come to the end of another This Week in Google. I'm so glad you could be here, Matthew Ingram. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Really appreciate it. Anything you want to plug? Just everybody should read gigaohm.com.
Yes, read GigaOhm all the time. Make it your homepage.
We do. GigaOhm is just awesome. And it's not just you, it's all the other great people there, including, of course, Malik. But it's really become, for me, a go-to site.
We have a great team.
Great team and very insightful stuff. It's more than just breaking news. You learn a lot. You really do.
And we do have some of our newer writers. Sina Brewster, for example, writes a lot about 3D printing and sort of really cutting edge stuff. I find it fascinating. I always learn something from her. She writes about drones and stuff like that. It's incredibly fascinating. We
have a lot of people from GigaOhm on this show because it's some of the best tech journalists out there. Really great. And I don't know Signe, but I will look her up. Or him. It's a her.
It's a her, yeah.
She's a she.
Yeah.
Not a he. Jeff Jarvis is, of course, the man in charge at the City University of New York, runs the entire place.
Yeah, I'm glad I got a boss.
Professor of journalism at CUNY. He's also the author of Public Parts and blogs at buzzmachine.com. Thank you, Jeffrey. I'm hoping Gina will be back next week. I have no reason to think otherwise. We miss Gina, but yeah, she's the greatest. It's nice to have people like Matthew we can call on, though. Thank you for joining us. We do This Week in Google, 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern Time, 2100 UTC on Wednesday afternoons. Please stop by. Please join us. We love having you here. But if you can't watch live on-demand, audio and video always available for free, always free, at twit.tv/twig or wherever you subscribe to netcasts. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next Wednesday on Twig.